Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Michael, don't forget about tonight's banquet, my wife exclaimed, her voice rising as she hurried out the door. This is very important for my career, I reassured her. Don't worry, I'll be there. After finishing my porridge, I put the dishes in the sink and put my mobile phone on the table, a symbol of my intention to disconnect for a while. I rushed upstairs and changed out of my work suit for comfortable golf clothes. After throwing my clubs and shoes in the car, I went to meet a couple of old friends at a picturesque golf course about 100 miles from the city. We had an appointment at 11:30 p.m., and a crisp autumn day promised to be perfect for a round of golf. Some events in life are simply priceless. We finished the game around 3:30 p.m. and headed to the clubhouse, where laughter and camaraderie reigned. It's been a long time since I've seen Anthony and Elliot, my two college buddies, and our reunion was a great success. We had a hearty dinner, reminisced about the past, and shared stories that were as fresh as an autumn breeze. The fun was so contagious that we decided to make a few more holes before it got dark. "That was fantastic!" exclaimed Anthony, wiping sweat from his forehead when we were done. "Do you have to hurry, or can you join us for another drink, Michael?" I chuckled. Am I ever going to give up a drink, especially from such a generous loser? "Let's go to the local bar." We settled into our favorite bar, sipping cold beers and telling stories about our glory days. I was amazed at how much I enjoyed myself and how much I would like to see Anthony and Elliot more often. But as I approached the house, a threatening cloud began to hang over my good mood. I had already imagined how a storm would break out in my relationship with Elizabeth. Imagining her fury, I giggled to myself at the absurdity of my thoughts. She will undoubtedly be waiting for me. "Where the hell did you go?" she will demand as soon as I enter the door. When I finally entered the living room, her words rang out in full voice. "I told you that this banquet is very important to me. You should have been home by 6. "I'm sorry, my love. My boss sent me on business. There were terrible traffic jams, and so I just got back," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "You know, I talked to Jeffrey. He was at home at 7:30. According to him, you took time off from work, and you left your cell phone on the kitchen table so I couldn't reach you." Elizabeth raised her voice with each accusation. "You're a terrible liar and a lousy lover." "Well, since we've figured it out, I give up, dear," I said with a tired smile. "I'm exhausted." "Is it decided?" "What's been decided?" she snapped, her eyes flashing with indignation. By this point, Elizabeth was tired of playing charade. "You're lying to me, Michael. Will you try to tell the truth for once?" I sighed, preparing for the wild fairy tale that had become my reality. "Okay, let's get started. I was kidnapped along with the car by a gang of pirates. They took me to some dilapidated warehouse, planning to hold me for ransom. But then aliens appeared out of nowhere, dragged me onto their plane and began to probe me. Well, let's just say they were especially interested in my teeth, eyes, and other sensitive areas." Elizabeth stared at me with an expression of disbelief on her face. "Do you think I'll believe that?" "Honestly, it's true. As soon as they left me alone, I managed to free myself from the ropes that bound me. And then the real tests began. It was necessary to understand how to control their spacecraft. Anyway, I accidentally landed in an unknown place. From there, I had to hitchhike to my car with a truck driver. But I feel surprisingly good, just a little tired." Elizabeth's expression changed from disbelief to pure disappointment. It seemed like it was about to explode. "Michael, what are you talking about? Stop talking nonsense. Do you even realize how much that banquet meant to me? I was promoted and you were supposed to be my +1. It was very awkward to show up without you." "I actually played golf with Anthony and Elliot, my old college buddies," I admitted, waving off her outrage. "At first they had me at gunpoint, but on the 7th hole I smashed them 30 feet. I've been on a roll ever since. Is this a new putter? It's just a masterpiece. I swear I'm hitting 300 yards. "Playing golf?" Elizabeth repeated, disbelief in her voice. "You knew how important this dinner was to me and you decided to play golf instead? Did you really plan everything in advance?" "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, so I cheated a little. I thought maybe you wouldn't find out," I confessed, trying to justify myself. I don't recognize it? Do you think I won't notice the empty chair next to me? Elizabeth fired back, her anger palpable. Why did you decide that I wouldn't be offended by your absence from such an important event? You should have known what it meant to me. After pausing, I realized the depth of my mistake. If you look back, I probably should have seen this coming, I muttered, still overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions bubbling between us. At that moment, I felt exciting and undeniably different. Events were unfolding in a whirlwind, and the last thing I wanted to do was hurt you. It's just golf, I thought, nothing personal. Are you out of your mind? Or did you and your old buddy overdo it a little bit, Michael? Elizabeth replied, her eyes narrowed. You sound like you're in another universe. To be honest, I'm too exhausted to deal with your selfish antics today. You can spend the night in one of the old children's rooms, she continued, her voice cold and distant. Don't even think about touching me or talking to me for a while. No problem, dear, I replied, dropping to an exaggerated whisper. I'll be as quiet as a mouse. Elizabeth stared at me as if I were some kind of strange creature she had never encountered before. Heading to Kevin's room, I couldn't help but chuckle. After 24 years of marriage and 2 college kids, Elizabeth and I were sailing the uncharted waters of an empty nest. I settled into Kevin's bed and dozed off, while the events of the day repeated themselves in my head like a broken record. When morning came, I was getting dressed for work, reading the newspaper and eating cereal when Elizabeth came into the room with an expression of irritation and determination. Be careful, Michael, don't think I've dealt with you, she warned, her voice firm. You still have a lot to do if you hope to catch up on yesterday. And just so you know, I'll be working late tonight so you can start your penance by cooking dinner for yourself. Of course, honey, I replied, trying not to strain myself. I'll do fine. Have a good time. What do you mean, have a good time? She pressed, raising her eyebrows. Have a great day. Be happy. Don't worry about me. And beware of wooden nickels, I added with a casual shrug. After giving me a look that could curdle milk, she turned on her heel and went to work. I picked up the phone and called the office, pretending to be sick to get a day off. This morning started with an impromptu shopping trip. In the store, I came across the main temptation, the largest flat-screen TV imaginable. I couldn't resist and immediately ordered it with same-day delivery. By the evening, everything was ready, and I leaned back in my chair to watch the news. The female presenter looked so real that I tried to look into her cleavage, confident that she was right here in the room with me. The living room was dominated by the TV, a colossal presence blocking access to the closet, but it was worth every penny. I called a few friends from work, invited them to the opening of the World Series, and ordered pizza and ribs at one of the local establishments. During the third goal, Elizabeth came into the room, and her expression was priceless. Completely amazed, she stood speechless. Harry's accountant, as opportunistic as ever, jumped to his feet to greet her. Congratulations on the improvement. This TV is simply amazing. The old man is lucky to have a wife like you, he exclaimed, and his enthusiasm echoed through the room. Elizabeth's confused gaze darted between me and the game, and I couldn't help but grin, feeling a mixture of mischief and triumph. Thank you. Elizabeth paused, a note of uncertainty in her voice. I'm really tired, so I'll leave you to watch the game and go to bed. What's the matter? To my surprise, she seemed to take the news calmly. I wondered how furious she would be in the morning. I was already dressed for work, sipping coffee and looking through the morning newspaper, when Elizabeth burst into the kitchen. Get that damn thing out of here and get back to the store before I get back from work tonight. Michael, can you hear me? I hear you, dear, I replied with a playful grin. Don't shout, I'm not deaf. When the door slammed shut, its frame shook as if the glass might break. Sometimes it was hard to keep up with her. That evening, I was sitting comfortably before the game when Elizabeth burst into the living room. I thought I asked you to return this thing today, she began, raising her voice. In response, you said that you heard me and that I didn't need to raise my voice. And so I come home, and she's still here? What part of it didn't you understand, you idiot? To be honest, I didn't get it. To be honest, I've never understood how attractive Norm is in this show. He's not even that funny." Indignation turned her face crimson, and foam and saliva almost gushed out of her mouth. "Michael, hear me. I wanted you to return the TV, but you didn't." "I didn't buy this thing to return it, dear." I couldn't help but smile. "I like him, and I'm going to keep him." I leaned back, enjoying the moment. "I understood every word you said this morning. In fact, the fact is that I just decided not to follow your orders, and nothing more." A look of disbelief appeared in Elizabeth's eyes. "What's happened to you lately, Michael? First you miss an important event under some ridiculous pretext, and then you immediately order this huge, certainly expensive TV without even discussing it with me. Are you all right?" There was a note of genuine concern in her voice. "I feel great, dear. Thank you for the question." I chuckled softly. "If I had told you about the TV, you would have refused right away. It was easier for me that way. No need to argue, no need to worry. And the great thing is, it doesn't hurt anyone. Except for me, of course." "Besides you, Michael?" she asked incredulously. But I grinned. "No one, dear. Just me." "I'm in terrible pain," snarled Elizabeth, her displeasure palpable. "It really annoys me. The thing is just too big for this room. I can't even put a vacuum cleaner in here. As a result, you spent a fortune on something that wasn't even suitable for our house and didn't even think to consult me. Why do you believe that it won't hurt anyone? You know, when you say that, it's like you don't understand anything. I can't just do what makes me happy without thinking about how it will affect you." "Really, Michael? You've never done anything like this before? So why do I have to teach you the same thing all the time?" asked Elizabeth, desperation creeping into her voice. "You're acting like a narcissistic boy." "Yes, I know you're right," I admitted, feeling the weight of her words. "I'll return the TV on Monday," I offered weakly. "I'd like you to do it tomorrow," she insisted. "I have to work for a few hours in the afternoon." "Working on a Saturday is frustrating, of course, but it's thanks to her that I got a promotion," Elizabeth reasoned, her tone softening a little. "Please, just make sure he's gone by the time I get back tomorrow night." "Of course," I nodded, but my thoughts flowed in different directions. I stared at the TV, lost in thoughts of the star of my daydreams. On Saturday afternoon, I decided to call Elizabeth's parents and invite them to lunch. When I arrived at the cafe, I introduced them to Barbara Wright, who was already waiting for me. Barbara looked exhausted, and I wondered how she was coping. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's parents seemed much more interested in the free lunch I was giving them than in anything else. At about 3 o'clock, we followed Barbara to her house and parked at the entrance. Barbara received us in her beautifully decorated living room, but the atmosphere quickly changed when she approached the security console. After a few quick taps, the room erupted into a cacophony of sirens warning all intruders to flee. The sudden noise sent chills down our backs. Before we could react, the front door burst open, and Barbara's husband Robert jumped out with a bat at the ready. The man was completely naked, confusion and adrenaline mixed in his behavior. He didn't recognize me or Elizabeth's parents, and swung the bat in our direction with wild eyes. "Get out of here before I knock your brains out!" he shouted, panic and aggression mixed in his voice. There was tension in the room, and we all froze, caught off guard. "Go to the devil!" he shouted, pulling the bat back as if preparing to swing. For a moment, I thought about giving it to him. Then a shrill scream shattered the tension. "What are you doing here?" Elizabeth's parents turned away from the sight of the naked baseball player, their gazes fixed on Elizabeth, who was standing in the doorway, clutching a sheet to her body, shock and embarrassment reflected on her face. "I invited them to have some fun, Mrs. Nelson," Barbara interjected, walking into the room with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. Robert was not very secretive about his affairs, and I had suspicions as soon as I told him that I would be coming over for the weekend. "I even thought it would be you, Mrs. Nelson, considering how cozy he was with you at the banquet last night." Nodding politely to Elizabeth's parents, I was still trying to make sense of the scene unfolding in front of me. Walking up to Barbara, I shook her hand, then turned my attention to Elizabeth's boss, Robert, and only then did I meet Elizabeth's gaze. "You know what? There's a game tonight, and I'm not going to miss it on my big screen. When you're done here, you'll take your parents home." Right. Elizabeth? I added, raising an eyebrow. I think they won't mind. Give me a minute to grab some things during the commercial, although the TV is banned. As soon as the match was over, I gathered Elizabeth's clothes and carried them into the living room. When Elizabeth entered the room, her face expressed a mixture of defiance and despair as she examined the pile of her belongings. Michael, don't do this, please. It was just a novel and nothing more. I never wanted you to get hurt. You shouldn't have found out. Why didn't I notice this empty chair? I snapped, pointing out the glaring absence. This marriage meant everything to me, and you just left him for an affair. But I love you, not him at all, she pleaded, despair filling her voice. Perhaps this is really the case. Or maybe not, I replied, my heart pounding wildly from the weight of her words. It doesn't make any sense now, does it? When I decided to play golf during that big event that meant so much to you, you were furious. Those were your words, not mine. But isn't sleeping with the boss worse than making a couple of holes, Elizabeth? I'm the only one who really suffers. But you have no idea, Michael. Dad threw a torrent of humiliation at me. They think I'm some kind of desperate girl, and now I can't even work with Robert. Shouldn't we forget about my little indiscretion? Elizabeth pleaded, her voice trembling with despair. Your affair with another man? This can be ignored, I replied, keeping my tone even. Soon, tears flowed down her cheeks as I continued. Lies, betrayal, broken trust. These are the real obstacles. You've been getting a taste of this pain from me lately. It's unbearable to coexist with such a person, isn't it? Take your things with you, Elizabeth. My lawyer will contact you on Monday. You can keep it, but you're not welcome here anymore. Forgiving cheater. Our marriage was broken into small pieces. Just like Bradley, thanks to our prenuptial agreement, she was left with what she came into our marriage with. I didn't just make her family hate her, I left this woman with nothing. Now she's officially broke. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The minutes ticked by painfully for Jason, each second stretching into an eternity. He and his wife, Beatrice, sat in the sterile confines of the doctor's office, anxiously awaiting the verdict on his medical tests. For months, Jason had battled an unrelenting wave of illness, and despite numerous visits to various doctors, no one had been able to unravel the mystery of his condition. While he was relieved to learn that it wasn't cancer or a heart ailment, the absence of answers left a nagging sense of uncertainty. Their journey led them to Dr. Batter, a renowned specialist known for tackling the most perplexing medical cases. Patients from every corner of the country flocked to him when traditional medicine failed to provide clarity. Jason and Beatrice felt fortunate to secure an appointment with such an esteemed physician. After days filled with exhaustive tests that examined every inch of his body, they were finally called in to hear the results. A wave of anticipation washed over them as Dr. Batter stepped into the room. He was an older gentleman with thin-rimmed glasses perched on his nose and a warm, reassuring smile that instantly put them at ease. Hello, Jason and Beatrice. I apologize for the delay, he said, settling into his chair. I have some good news, Jason. You should be fine. A collective sigh of relief escaped their lips, the weight of worry lifting slightly from their shoulders. They had dreaded the possibility of grim news after their agonizing wait. What's going on with me, Doc? Jason asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Why do I keep throwing up? Dr. Batter leaned forward, his expression serious yet compassionate. It's a rare but straightforward neurological disorder that interferes with your biological functions, he explained, unveiling the enigma that had haunted Jason for so long. As the pieces of his health puzzle began to fall into place, hope flickered in the air, brightening the room with the promise of understanding and recovery. You can take care of Jason's health with a simple prescription that your health insurance will pay for. Although this means that you need to stick to such a regime for life, it opens the way to a long and fulfilling future. How nice to hear that, Beatrice exclaimed with a smile. I've been losing sleep over the Jason situation for months now. Dr. Batter nodded, his expression changing slightly. This brings me to you, Beatrice. I need to discuss something with you in private, if you don't mind. Concern flickered between Jason and Beatrice, and they exchanged glances, and then turned back to the doctor. Is everything okay? Beatrice asked, concern in her voice. Dr. Batter calmed her down. I just want to share with you some simple measures that will help Jason feel better. Jason, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, said they didn't have to stay to discuss these details. Why don't you go outside for a while? He's probably right, honey, Beatrice agreed softly. Get some fresh air. I'll join you at the cafe next door in a while. Relieved to be out of the clinical setting, Jason nodded and went outside. He was tired of the constant visits to doctors and was ready to leave the sterile walls. After finally hearing positive news about his health, he was ready to put the medical drama in the past. He shook hands with Dr. Batter, expressed his gratitude, and left the office, unaware of the upcoming weighty conversation. Beatrice, Dr. Batter began in a serious tone, your husband is suffering from a serious illness. The real state of his health is much more serious than I initially assumed. Beatrice's heart sank and shock showed on her face. What? How much time does he have left? A few weeks at most. Beatrice was breathing in ragged gulps. Her heart was pounding in her chest like a drum signaling an approaching storm. Anxiety gripped her like a vice. How could this happen? Why did he tell him that he would be fine? I had to get him out of that office, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He needed to talk to you about his condition, and that you're the only one who can really help him. I've been through this before. Such conversations are deeply personal, and it's usually better if I discuss them with my wife in private. Beatrice thought for a moment, trying to comprehend the gravity of this revelation. Okay, she finally said, her voice firmer and understanding breaking through the haze of worry. I will do my best to help my husband. What is required of me? First of all, let's talk about his diet. I heard that you switched him to a vegan diet. Yes, it's a healthy choice, Beatrice replied firmly, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. Stop it, right now. This diet threatens his health. But it's more useful. Jason likes it. For many, yes, but not for a man like Jason. This diet disrupts the neurological functions of his brain, and it affects everything. He needs to start eating meat again, immediately. Beatrice felt the ground shift beneath her. Stunned, she tried to make sense of this revelation. She had always believed that veganism was the epitome of health, an ethical choice that would benefit both of them. But now reality hit her like a cold wave. She unknowingly put her husband in danger. Knowing the real expected consequences, she would never have sent her husband on this path. Of course, I'll start giving him meat right away, Beatrice promised the doctor, beaming with determination. But he needs more than that. Do whatever he wants. If he asks for anything, just do it. Just cook whatever he wants and no doubt about it, she added, and there was a hint of concern in her voice. Sounds like a plan, the doctor replied with an encouraging smile on his face. Now let's move on to something important. He shouldn't move a finger around the house. He's too fragile for hard work. Working in the yard, moving furniture, fixing plumbing, painting, solving problems with electricity, none of this is for him. Beatrice furrowed her brows as she considered his words. But I'm already doing all the traditional housework. Do I have to take over everything else? Yes, Dr. Batter confirmed. His tone was even. You will need to manage all this and keep track of expenses. He said that money has been bothering him a lot lately. The stress of hiring help can worsen his neurological condition. Beatrice took a deep breath, pulling herself together. Okay, I'll do my best. I can handle the housework, and I think I can find 1 or 2 friends who are willing to help for free. This way we won't have to spend extra money. Amazing! This conversation is unfolding in a way I never imagined. In my past, many wives have not been so understanding and open. As I said before, I am ready to do whatever it takes to support Jason during this difficult time. Now let's move on to a more intimate topic. Beatrice, you need to step up your game in the bedroom. Wait, what? she replied, knitting her brows in confusion. "We have a decent sex life as it is," she defended herself. Dr. Batter nodded, acknowledging her point, but continued. "Even with Jason's illness, you still have an intimate relationship once or twice a week, right?" "Of course," Beatrice admitted. "Sometimes even more often." "Okay, but honestly, it should be much more often. We are talking about doubling or even tripling the number of your meetings." Beatrice's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Why do I need this?" "Jason's libido has increased due to his neurological disease. By not meeting these increased needs, he puts himself at risk. But his immune system is already compromised. He never talked about needing intimacy," she countered, and there was a hint of concern in her voice. "He didn't dare bring up the subject because he didn't want to add to your stress. So I want to put it bluntly. If you want him to flourish, you both need to embrace a lot more passion." Beatrice was stunned, her thoughts scattered. "I always thought that our intimate life was enough. My friends are jealous of what we have." She paused, thinking about how to combine her busy schedule with these new expectations. How was she going to find time to triple her intimate moments when she was already overloaded with household chores? Beatrice sat there, shock and reflection reflected on her face. Beatrice's mind was full of questions, but she forced herself to concentrate. After all, Dr. Batter was an expert, and she knew she had to trust his judgment, even if some of it didn't make sense to her. "Is there anything else I should know?" "What is it?" she asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Yes," he replied in an even tone. "He needs to refrain from other intimate relationships." Beatrice's heart sank. Anger bubbled up inside her as she considered his words. Without missing a second, Dr. Batter continued. "In fact, he should also not strive to bring you to a peak during regular intimate relationships. This may worsen his neurological condition. The best thing is, if you let him make love to you, let him reach his peak, and everything will be simple. You will need to pretend that you like it so that he is satisfied." Rage flared up inside Beatrice. It seemed that she was being asked to sacrifice everything for her husband's well-being, including her own desires. "Is there anything else I need to know?" "What is it?" she asked, barely able to contain her irritation. "Do you have beautiful girlfriends?" Dr. Batter raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "There are a couple of very beautiful friends," she admitted. "Can you bring one of them?" Feeling confused and unexpectedly relieved, Beatrice backed away. Perhaps it was a way to regain a part of her life that she considered lost. Upon entering the consulting room, Beatrice braced herself for the worst, expecting Dr. Batter to suggest something completely outrageous. For example, suggest that Jason improve his health by having affairs with her friends. So when the doctor awkwardly asked if she could set him up with one of her attractive girlfriends, it seemed strange, if not downright unethical. "No, I can't do that, doctor," she replied, clearly uncomfortable. Dr. Batter replied calmly, "It's not a problem, but it might be helpful for Jason if you encourage your friends to spend time with him." The words hung in the air, weighed down by the subtext. "What?" Beatrice exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "Doctor, are you serious? This can't be a real offer." "It's all in the interest of improving his health," Dr. Batter insisted, his tone adamant. "By entering into intimate relationships with other women, it's a simple solution." Beatrice felt a surge of anger. "This is probably some kind of sick joke. You can't be serious. It can't be for the sake of my husband's health." "I assure you, Beatrice, this is quite real," Dr. Batter pressed. "If we don't take action soon, Jason's health will rapidly deteriorate." "It can't be," she replied, skepticism in her voice. "I suspect that Jason is involved in this whole scheme, trying to manipulate me to get an extra portion of attention and pleasure. This is absurd." But Dr. Batter was not at a loss. He spent the next hour telling her all the facts, a mountain of evidence that was hard to ignore. He showed the results of Jason's medical research, as well as comprehensive studies over the past 50 years that described similar cases in detail. The doctor even presented interviews with women who had gone through the same difficult path, and talked about how an extramarital affair, against all odds, saved their husbands' lives. Beatrice's heart was pounding wildly as she absorbed the information. What started as a strange conversation gradually turned into a dilemma that was both disturbing and perhaps necessary. The stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Beatrice froze in place, her thoughts racing wildly as she absorbed the mountain of evidence spread out in front of her. Every detail seemed like a piece of a puzzle to her, and she desperately searched for any sign that Dr. Batter had made a mistake or misled her. But as the weight of the truth settled in her head, she realized with a sinking heart that the doctor was not only honest, but also that Jason's survival depended on following his advice. "Okay, I admit it," Beatrice finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "Everything you tell me is absolutely true." A wave of determination swept over her. "I'm sorry that I doubted you. I will do everything to help Jason, even if it means persuading my attractive girlfriends to be with him. If anyone doubts, I will find a way to ensure that they get what they need, no matter what it takes." Dr. Batter nodded, a serious gleam in his eyes. "I appreciate your commitment, Beatrice. It won't be easy, and you'll have to make difficult decisions. But what you do for Jason will really make a difference. He deserves a chance at a long and fulfilling life." "As long as he's alive, that's all that matters to me," she replied, her resolve strengthened. "That's good to hear," Dr. Batter said, a hint of encouragement in his tone. "And remember that when he has such meetings, I strongly recommend that you take part in them from time to time. Do you want me to explain to you the reasons for this?" Beatrice shook her head, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "There is no need. I believe that everything has a good reason." After that, they shook hands. A tacit understanding was established between them, and Beatrice left the doctor's office, her heart pounding with a newfound purpose. As she entered the cozy surroundings of a nearby cafe, she noticed Jason waiting for her at a corner table with an expression of anticipation on his face. She sat down on the chair opposite him, and he immediately pushed a steaming cup of coffee towards her. "It's been a long time," he said, and his eyes lit up at the sight of her appearance. Beatrice took a deep breath, ready to accept the challenges ahead, knowing that every step she took was for the sake of the man she cared about. "Is everything okay?" Jason asked with a note of concern in his voice. "Jason, I wish I could say the opposite, but you're going to die," Jason exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. "He told me you were going to be okay," she continued, her voice filled with sadness. "But he lied. He didn't want to carry the weight of this truth himself, so he shifted it onto me. In a way, he's a coward." "How much time do I have?" Jason's voice trembled, panic crept into him. "A few weeks at most." The air around him thickened as he tried to make sense of what he had said. He hadn't expected this from Beatrice. Now Jason was completely sure that it would not be possible to save the marriage. Just a month ago, Jason began to notice that Beatrice was behaving strangely and hired a private investigator. When the evidence of her infidelity was in his hands, Jason decided to check how much Beatrice loved him and played a prank on Dr. Batter. In fact, the doctor was a longtime friend of Jason's father and agreed to this prank. If Beatrice had agreed to do everything the doctor said, Jason would have thought about forgiving Beatrice. But now it was clear that she didn't have a drop of love for Jason. "Oh my God, is there anything we can do?" "What is it?" he asked, pretending to despair. "Absolutely nothing," she replied, her voice sounding resigned, as if sealing the fate they both feared. "Well, then it's time for us to get divorced, Beatrice." "What? What are you talking about, dear?" This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I found myself in the township, much like countless others who had no say in the matter. My life had unraveled in a way I never could have imagined, all because my wife had decided she'd had enough. The kids, naturally, stood by her. In that moment, I was cast out, an outsider in my own home. And truth be told, I couldn't blame them. Reflecting on my actions, I recognized that I had strayed far from the values of a traditional marriage. We had drifted apart, two ships lost at sea, and rather than face the reality of our growing distance, I had succumbed to infidelity. That reckless choice unleashed a whirlwind of consequences I was ill-prepared to confront. In the blink of an eye, my family had turned away from me. I found myself exiled from the home I had once cherished. My professional life crumbled as I faced the harsh reality of being fired. In today's unforgiving job market, the prospect of finding another position felt like a distant dream. I was left with nothing but the clothes on my back and a single box of my belongings. The town was a bleak space lined with makeshift tents, a refuge for those who, like me, had seen their lives turn to chaos. Once a hopeful community designed for single-family homes, it had fallen victim to the economic downturn that left dreams unfulfilled. As developers shuttered their projects, a crisis unfolded, leaving people adrift and desperate. Tent cities began to emerge, seemingly overnight, as the need for shelter grew. In the midst of this turmoil, charitable organizations sprang into action, striving to establish a semblance of order and hope in a landscape marked by despair. Here, in this forgotten corner of the world, I would have to forge a new existence amidst the echoes of my past. The local government, short of funds, stood aside, powerless and silent, and the protests of residents of nearby settlements echoed in the air like a distant echo. When I finally reached a town 10 miles from my hometown, I found myself ill-prepared for the adventure ahead. Instead of a sturdy tent, I carried with me a relic box that I pulled out of a dumpster behind the mall, and its original contents remained a mystery to me. The box was long and rectangular, resembling a coffin, and although it barely contained my height, I could curl up in it like an origami man. It's better than nothing, I told myself, although in fact, I felt completely out of place. There was a large homemade sign made from a forklift pallet at the main entrance to the camp. "Welcome to the village," read a sign decorated with fancy hand-painted flowers that seemed to whisper the promise of warmth. Spread over an area of at least 50 acres, the camp was a surprisingly vibrant tapestry of life. For a gathering of lost souls and wanderers, it was surprisingly organized. Tents, boxes, huts, shacks, and even old cars were strategically placed, creating a strange sense of community. As I made my way through the maze in search of a place that could be called my own, I was struck by the vibrant activity around me. To my surprise, many of the residents were smiling, their laughter mixed with the crackle of bonfires and the alluring aroma of fried meat in the air. Generators hummed in the background, powering lights and various utilities, creating a strange contrast to the harsh surroundings. Instead of the gloomy picture I was preparing for, something like a third-world slum, I was faced with a surprisingly clean and welcoming atmosphere. And yet, despite the camaraderie, I couldn't shake my wariness. After all, I've heard rumors about dark stories related to this place. I kept my distance from everyone, opting for a simple smile and a nod as my only forms of interaction. Perhaps my perspective would shift once I took in more of my surroundings. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stumbled upon Shady Alley, as the crooked sign declared, a path winding into the woods that felt eerily serene compared to the bustling camp. Perfect. I was out of my element and had no desire to stir up any trouble. What I craved was a quiet refuge away from the throngs of people. Not far down the lane, I discovered an inviting spot and set up my makeshift shelter. Nearby, a small blue tent stood, with a fire crackling softly in front of it. The atmosphere was tranquil, a welcome contrast to the chaos of the day. I felt utterly drained, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Plans? I had none. My once predictable life had been turned upside down, and it felt like I was wandering through a bizarre dreamscape. All I could do was pray that this wouldn't devolve into a nightmare. I lay down in my cardboard sanctuary, pulling the flaps closed, desperate for some much-needed rest. If fate allowed me, I would keep to myself. I was resolved to make that work. Then, from the adjacent tent, I heard two voices. A male voice murmured low, incomprehensible words, while a softer female voice responded in a gentle cadence. As their conversation grew more intense, passion seeped into their tones, and it quickly became clear what was unfolding between them. The sounds surged, too compelling to ignore. Grunts, moans, playful slaps, and gasps filled the air. leaving me both bewildered and oddly exhilarated. How were they managing all of this in such a tiny space? It made me think back to my own dry spell. Had it been 2 months? 3? The longing I felt stirred within me, a reminder of what I had been missing. Excitement shot through me like electricity. The primal energy of these voices was completely intoxicating. An irresistible desire took hold of me, and I surrendered to my most instinctive desires. Sheltering in a coffin-like box, I let my imagination run wild, imagining the scene unfolding in this small, bright tent. The voices grew louder, enveloping me like a siren's call. Suddenly, I heard the rustle of leaves, which seemed to be getting closer, bringing me back to reality. I froze in place, praying it was just a dream. But then a jolt, a blow against my box destroyed my fantasies, giving way to a panic attack. In my haste, I opened the doors and sat down, my heart pounding. A flickering street lamp at the end of the alley illuminated the scene with a dim light. The blue tent, clearly designed for children and not designed for the vagaries of nature, fluttered violently in the wind. A moment before, the tent had been only 10 feet away from me, and now it was pressed against my makeshift shelter, held only by my weight inside the box. "Don't even think about stopping, George." A woman's voice was coming from the tent, which was now nothing more than a nylon cocoon. The moment hung in the balance, electric and alive, and I braced myself for what was coming next. The world around me erupted into chaos as the undulating mass crashed down, engulfing me and my house in a surreal wave of confusion. A sharp pang of loss hit me as I heard the crunching and tearing of cardboard that echoed through the air. The two figures above me wrestled with an energy that seemed to defy their awareness of my presence, separated only by a flimsy layer of nylon. I could feel the heat of their breath, a furious panting that brushed against my skin, while my hands instinctively pressed against my face, searching for clarity. As my fingers grazed something soft, I instinctively squeezed, only to realize with a jolt that I had grasped a breast, large and undeniably captivating. The absurdity of the moment overwhelmed any flicker of arousal, though I would replay the scene in my mind countless times afterward. A low growl rumbled above me, intensifying the pressure that pinned me down. "Oh no, this is it," I thought. My leg was twisted at an uncomfortable angle, and an urgent prayer slipped from my lips, hoping this unexpected encounter with the neighbors would spare me from injury. The last thing I needed was the burden of medical bills or the knowledge of where to seek help. In a sudden, chaotic tumble, they collapsed onto me, expelling my breath in a rush. We gasped together, each for our own reasons, caught in a bizarre tableau. Then came the unmistakable sound of a long zipper, followed by a shuffling that sent a jolt through my body. In an instant, the weight that had trapped me vanished, leaving the nylon fabric to drift away like a ghostly veil. Dazed, I lay there holding my breath, struggling to process the whirlwind of sensations. As the fabric slipped from my face, I blinked up at two naked figures silhouetted against the dim light, their glistening bodies shimmering with an almost otherworldly glow. I could only imagine the shock frozen on my face, caught in this surreal moment. My world was turned upside down, the house lay in ruins, my leg throbbed with pain, and I found myself an unwitting spectator of a couple of naked feasters. What an unexpected welcome! The man among them held out his hand with a charming grin. I hesitated, but before I knew it, he lifted me off the ground. A sudden change in weight pierced my delicate leg, and both of them instinctively reached out to support me. There was an unmistakable scent of desire in the air around us, enveloping me like a warm blanket and igniting a spark deep inside that I desperately tried to ignore. And then Kelly appeared. She flashed an embarrassed smile that could melt glaciers. "I apologize for, well, the circumstances." As my eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, I couldn't help but notice the playful sparkle in her gaze. Kelly couldn't have been more than 30, wild dark hair framing her alabaster skin. Her body was an alluring masterpiece, her curves seemed sculpted by gods, and her breasts practically demanded my attention. I tried not to be tempted, but it wasn't an easy battle. Then George appeared, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a wiry figure that suggested he had seen a lot of adventures in his lifetime. His accent was deep and attractive, and although he was a few inches shorter than me, he exuded a strong presence. "It looks like your house has been damaged," he said, nodding encouragingly. "Don't worry, we'll sort it out." After what seemed like an eternity, I was finally able to stammer, "I'm Michael." My gaze returned to the wreckage of my once cozy cabin, to the remnants of my life scattered like forgotten dreams. "He gets carried away sometimes," Kelly said, annoyance and humor mixed in her tone. "When George claims that he will fix everything, you can trust him." Nodding, Kelly held out my hand. "You can stay with us tonight." "It's going to be a little cramped, though," George added with a cheeky wink. While Kelly was crouching down to get tent poles from the chaotic storage, I couldn't help but admire her. The faint glow of a distant street lamp illuminated her figure, making her silhouette sparkle seductively. George seemed to catch my wandering gaze and came closer, putting his arm around my shoulders. My heart was pounding wildly, caught between the desire to escape and the thrill of the moment. "I'm sorry," I stammered, choosing my words. "I didn't mean to." George interrupted me, a note of comradely concern in his voice. "Michael, you have no idea. She's one of the best I've ever had, and trust me, I've had a lot of them." He laughed heartily, slapping me on the back, and I was grateful for the shadow that hid the embarrassment creeping across my cheeks. "You're lucky, my friend. You can have it too. Just say the word." George leaned towards him, a conspiratorial gleam in his eyes. "I can tell she likes you." My face felt like it was on fire. Of course he was joking. It was a village where people were not always distinguished by sophistication. The humor here was often crude and unfiltered, so I heard. I giggled nervously, not knowing whether to take him seriously or not. Catching George's eye, Kelly raised her head and began to fold the tent, a playful grin dancing on her lips. Rolling her eyes dramatically, she smiled apologetically and plunged back into her work. "Another pole broke, honey," she exclaimed, her tone light despite her disappointment. "It looks like we're going to have to figure something out, and let's not forget about Michael." "Let's assess the damage," George suggested, glancing around my chaotic living room and wrinkling his nose in disgust. "No one is going to stay here like this." He looked me up and down carefully, disbelief written all over his face. "Seriously, how did you even fit in here?" I giggled, my cheeks burning. "It wasn't really a walk in the park." After what seemed like an eternity, George and Kelly finally changed into something more comfortable, and a wave of relief washed over me. George began to build a fire. The crackling flames promised warmth and comfort. They insisted that I take their tent for the night, and although they were quite happy sleeping under the stars, I couldn't refuse their offer. "It's the least we can do, considering everything," George said with a shrug, and having no other options, I agreed. There was tension in the air, reminiscent of the chaotic events of the night. I found a quiet corner, curled up, pulled off my shorts, hugged myself and squeezed my eyes shut. Images of Kelly's stunning figure flashed through my mind, her silhouette shining under the light of a street lamp, and I couldn't get rid of the intoxicating mixture of desire and insecurity that gripped me. George was not mistaken when he spoke about her attractiveness. Her figure was a masterpiece and alluring, a vision of perfection that seemed almost otherworldly. Even in this modest village, he found a gold mine. I can still picture her leaning over this very tent, her skin glistening with sweat and something even more intoxicating, a vivid memory etched in my mind. Suddenly, a sly grin flashed through my thoughts, causing a rush of bliss. As if she were next to me, her voice whispered sultrily in my ear, separated only by a fragile nylon barrier. "He's right, you know," she muttered, mischief in her tone. "Just say it." George was not mistaken when he talked about her attractiveness. Her figure was a masterpiece and alluring, a vision of perfection that seemed almost otherworldly. Even in this modest village, he found a gold mine. I can still picture her leaning over this very tent, her skin glistening with sweat and something even more intoxicating, a vivid memory etched in my memory. Suddenly, a sly grin flashed through my thoughts, causing a rush of bliss. As if she were next to me, Her voice whispered sultrily in my ear, separated only by a fragile nylon barrier. "He's right, you know," she muttered, mischief in her tone. "Just say it." I had no idea that my life would turn around so abruptly. Kelly turned out to be a very alluring woman. I really felt happy with her. As it turned out later, she met George a year ago. He was as homeless as I was. A couple of times a year, Kelly spent time with George in his tent just for something unusual. In fact, Kelly was the daughter of a wealthy businessman, which surprised me. She liked to change her lifestyle abruptly for a couple of days a year. It made her realize how great everything was for her. Kelly and I spent 3 unforgettable nights, after which we fell in love with each other. On the 4th day, Kelly and I went to meet her parents. That's the kind of roller coaster that happened in my life. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Jake sat quietly at the edge of their bed, observing a scene that had become familiar over the years. His wife, Barbara, getting ready for a night out. This particular evening, however, felt different from all the rest. Though he still found joy in watching her, a profound sadness seemed to cloud that joy, pressing heavily on his heart. How is it possible, he thought, that she looks even more stunning tonight than she has in all the years I've known her? Barbara was about to turn 50, and they had a special evening planned just for the two of them, a private celebration ahead of tomorrow's big birthday party with their children and grandchildren. As she sat at her vanity, Jake let his gaze linger on her, admiring the beauty that had remained untouched by the years. Her hair still framed her face perfectly. Her body was as graceful as ever, a testament to the effort she had put in to stay fit. And that smile, that teasing glint in her eye. He couldn't help but smile, thinking about how she always playfully flaunted herself. Pride swelled within him, pride in the woman he loved for 3 decades, but it was quickly overtaken by the weight of his sadness. Jake was a man who took pride in his logical, problem-solving nature. He was the one colleagues turned to when something at work needed careful analysis, knowing he'd deliver a well-thought-out solution, even if it took time. But here, in this moment, that same logic was of no comfort. He found himself sitting on the bed, feeling lost, his mind filled with questions. Is this really the last time I'll get to watch her like this? I love her more than anything. Why does it feel like I'm losing her? What went wrong? How did I not see it coming? His thoughts tumbled over each other, circling around in an endless loop like ripples across a still pond. He realized that tonight could mark a turning point, perhaps the most significant one in his life. A decision lay ahead, one that could mean a new beginning or the unraveling of everything he held dear. He had been preparing for this conversation for weeks, agonizing over how they had arrived at this fragile point in their relationship. The more he thought about it, the more he recognized that perhaps they weren't the perfect couple everyone believed them to be. He went over the clues in his mind, trying to make sense of it all. When did it start? Months ago, it seemed. She had begun pulling away, becoming more distant and preoccupied. He now realized that their intimacy had gradually faded until it had all but disappeared. Then there were her outbursts, sharp and unwarranted anger over trivial things. But what bothered him most were the lies. He recalled a specific moment, a dinner charge for 2 at a restaurant where he hadn't been with her. That night, it was clear something had shifted between them, and he wasn't the only person on her mind. Over the past couple of weeks, though, everything had changed again, almost as abruptly as before. Now, Barbara seemed attentive, eager even. She was suddenly affectionate, wanting to be close to him, to rekindle the love they had once shared. It should have made him happy, but instead, it left him bewildered. Why now, he wondered. What changed? He couldn't make sense of the shifts in her behavior. Each transformation felt like a departure from the woman he had married and loved for so long. Where had she gone? The kind, loving woman he once knew? Would he ever find her again? This new version of her felt foreign, and he didn't like what he saw. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Jake knew it was time to speak. Barbara, he began, his voice soft but steady. I just want you to know how much I love you. Watching you tonight, you're as beautiful as ever. I've loved you all these years, and I always will. Barbara paused, her reflection meeting his in the mirror. A curious expression crossed her face. Thank you, Jake, she replied gently. I'm not sure what made you say that, but I want you to know I love you too. She studied him for a moment longer, sensing the weight of something unspoken in the air. What's been troubling him so much lately? She wondered, her concern mirroring his unspoken fears. No matter how much effort she put into fixing their relationship, it felt like the more she tried, the more distant and detached he became. With an internal sigh, she reminded herself, I just have to keep trying. I'm not giving up on this. I love him so much, and I need him to love me the way I love him. Quietly, Jake murmured, I wonder if you love me the way I love you. Her ears perked up. What did you just say, Jake? You've been mumbling a lot lately. I need you to speak clearly. Meeting her gaze, he repeated himself. I wonder if you love me as much as I love you. In any other situation, the expression on her face might have been amusing. His words hit her like a punch, and her mouth fell open. Why would you say that? She asked, her voice laced with hurt. How could you even think that, let alone say it out loud? Are you just trying to be clever, or do you realize how painful those words are? Jake, keeping his composure, replied, We need to have a serious talk. We've got a little time before we go out, he continued. I need to say some things and ask you some questions. I'm not asking for answers right now, but by the end of tonight, I will need them. Barbara nodded, feeling a sense of dread rise up. Of course, ask me anything. I have nothing to hide from you. You're my husband, my partner. Jake almost couldn't help but smirk at her words. Tension rippled through his body, like a tightly pulled cord ready to snap. Barbara, listen carefully. There are some things I need to say, and I don't want responses just yet. I want you to think about them tonight. Your honest answers are crucial for the future of our marriage. Oh God, this is it. He wants a divorce, she thought, panic settling in. But as he'd asked, she stayed quiet, suppressing the urge to speak. Jake, steady and deliberate, laid out his concerns, systematically walking her through everything that had been bothering him. First off, you've practically shut me out of your life for months. Then, out of nowhere these last couple of weeks, you've been bending over backwards to please me, like you're trying to cater to my every need, even in bed. It's like I'm living with two different people. One minute, you're distant and unpredictable, and the next, you're trying to be my servant. For months, I felt like I was walking on eggshells, not knowing when your temper might explode. And then, there's the lies, over and over again, about where you've been and who you were with. The last straw was finding that receipt for dinner for two, and I know for a fact I wasn't the other person at that table. So here we are. Jake's eyes locked onto hers. I think you've been cheating. I think the affair ended recently, and now you're trying to slip back into our life like nothing happened. So here's what I need to know. Do you want a divorce? Do you love him? How many times and with how many people have you cheated? He paused, giving her a moment before delivering the final blow. Do you still want to stay married? And if you do, will there be more affairs? What reason can you give me to convince me that staying married to you is worth it? Barbara was silent, staring at him, completely frozen. Jake, noticing her composure, or what he thought was composure, was actually witnessing her utter shock and speechlessness. He stood up, his voice firm. Finish packing. I'll be waiting downstairs. We're going to be late if you don't hurry. Somehow, she managed to gather herself and finish getting ready, meeting Jake downstairs. The evening stretched on, and despite the heavy conversation that loomed over them, Jake reminded her that he didn't want to discuss any of his accusations during dinner. To her surprise, she found she could almost enjoy the time spent together, though the extra wine helped. By the time they returned home, Barbara was drained. Exhausted from the emotional weight of the night and a little too tipsy from the alcohol, she knew she wasn't in the right state to continue the conversation. Complaining of a headache, she excused herself and quickly changed into her nightgown. Crawling into her side of the bed, she fell asleep almost immediately, escaping from the painful reality she would eventually have to face. Jake, seeing how exhausted she was, decided it was best to delay their discussion. Not wasting any time, he climbed into bed himself, deciding tomorrow would be a better day for answers. Once again, he'd had too much to drink the previous night and fell into a deep, undisturbed sleep. By the time morning came, Jake was the first to rise. After a quick shower, he headed to the kitchen to start preparing breakfast. The first thing he did was set the coffee to brew, as he knew Barbara would soon join him, just as she often did. She was never one to linger in bed for long. Jake was already seated at the table when she finally entered the kitchen. "Can I get you some coffee?" he asked. "Maybe you'd like some toast or something light?" "I'll take some coffee, Jake," she replied. "But I'll pass on the food. My stomach's not ready for it yet. After last night, with everything that happened and all the drinks, I think I'll just stick to coffee." "Barbara," Jake said, his voice calm but firm. "Last night I laid everything out. I told you exactly what I needed to say, and now it's your turn. This morning, you get the floor, so give it your best shot, and let's see where we stand." "I've been thinking about what you said, Jake," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I heard you when you told me how important honesty is. I've thought about it a lot. I need you to understand that you're the only man I've ever loved, and I haven't been with anyone else since the day we got married. I'll try to respond to everything in the order you brought it up." She took a deep breath before continuing. "No, I've never wanted a divorce. There's no one else, no lover hiding in the background. So, no, I don't have anyone else to confess to you about. I've never cheated on you. I've always been faithful since the day we said our vows, and I don't want that to change. I want to stay married to you more than anything, and I will stay loyal to you for as long as we both live." "That credit card charge? It was just a business dinner. Either you forgot about it or I forgot to mention it. Whichever it wasn't anything more than that. And the reason I want to keep you by my side is because I love you. I love only you with everything I have, my heart, my body, my soul." She hesitated for a moment, then continued, "It's my fault too, for being distant. But you've also been distant. We both went through a rough patch in this marriage, and I don't think either of us fully realized it. But recently, I've started to remember why I love you so much. For the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to show you how much I care. I wanted to rekindle the love we almost lost." Jake looked at her, meeting her eyes with intensity. Barbara held his gaze, her expression calm, unwavering. "Jake, you have to believe me. I love you and only you." Jake continued staring at her, his face unreadable at first. But then, slowly, his expression began to change. Sadness crept over him, deepening with each second, until it looked as though he might break down. "Jake, what's wrong? Are you feeling okay?" Barbara's concern grew with his silence. "Do you need me to call someone? Maybe 911? Finally, Jake spoke, his voice low and monotone. "Barbara, I love you. I've always loved you. But I was hoping we could finally be honest with each other. I guess you can't, or won't, be truthful with me. I gave you every opportunity to do so because I genuinely wanted to make this marriage work." His voice grew stronger, laced with anger. "I did everything I could to save us, but I know you didn't. You didn't hold up your end." He reached into his lap, pulling out a large manila envelope, and slid it across the table to her. "I still love you, Barbara, but love isn't enough anymore. I don't want to be your husband any longer. I filed for divorce. You need to find a lawyer and have them contact mine." His voice hardened further. "I don't want to see you or speak to you anymore. I'm going to pack my things now and I'll be leaving soon. I suppose I should say I'm sorry, but I don't think you're sorry, so I don't feel the need to apologize. You've made your choices, and now you'll have to live with them." Jake stood up slowly and made his way upstairs to gather his clothes and toiletries. He had already booked a hotel room and, on his lawyer's advice, had taken care of all the financial arrangements to begin living separately from Barbara. Barbara sat frozen in place, stunned by what had just transpired. She didn't fully comprehend what was happening as Jake continued packing his things. He finished without saying another word, and when he finally left, she remained at the kitchen table, unmoving, for almost an hour. At last, she mustered the courage to drag the ominous envelope closer. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing the documents that spelled out the end of her life with Jake. Why didn't he trust me? She thought, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. Why did he believe all those terrible things about me? She was certain they could fix things, but Jake had already shut the door on any chance of reconciliation. Barbara's gaze lingered on the papers, her eyes glazing over without absorbing the words. Something else caught her attention inside the envelope. It seemed to be a photograph. Her fingers hesitated before retrieving it. When she saw it, her heart stopped. The image showed her unmistakably on all fours in her own bed with another man, and that man was not Jake. A gasp escaped her throat before she could stop it. Suddenly, it all made sense. Jake knew. She had believed her deception about the affair with Richard was foolproof, that Jake would never catch on. After ending the affair, she had genuinely tried to fix what she had broken in her marriage. But looking at the photo, she realized with crushing clarity that the only way to truly save her relationship would have been to confront the truth from the beginning. Yet, given the betrayal she had committed, honesty and integrity had been far from her strengths. The hardest truth of all was that Jake was gone, and he wasn't coming back. She knew he was a man of his word, and divorce was the only option he would accept. Deep down, she had lost the one person she had ever really loved. The irony was sharp. All the passion, all the exhilarating moments of her affair paled in comparison to the time she had shared with Jake. The vows they had taken, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, now twisted painfully in her chest, piercing her with the realization of what she had thrown away. This agony couldn't match what Jake must have endured, but it was the deepest pain she had ever felt. She knew now, without a doubt, that she was a betrayer. She had not only betrayed her husband, but their children, their entire family. That label, cheater, would now cling to her for the rest of her life. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.